Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, July 28th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris. I'm shook by the intro video not launching when it was supposed to for the YouTube version of the show. So tech issues almost certain to follow given that hot start that we're off to. But on this episode, we're going to take a look at some players who are likely to be moved at the trade deadline and then look at the depth charts behind those players to find out who those winners and significant playing time risers might ultimately be, because the unique timing of this year's trade deadline puts us in a position where we can actually pursue those players on Sunday in a lot of leagues. They could be big winners playing time wise between Monday and Tuesday. Deadline 6 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday. And we, as a group of fantasy players, could actually end up saving a lot of fab if we can, with some accuracy, predict who these winners are going to be. So what do you think our success rate could be at something like this,
2 to 5%.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Also, I think the reward is not substantial.
In many cases, I think you're right. I think if you play in mono leagues and in deeper mixed leagues, there's a little more there.
This list we created, there's one name that I'm kind of excited about. Maybe two.
Yeah, so stay tuned for the whole hour as we get one name really might help you.
Really. Oh, man, we teased that one well.
Yeah, we really did. There's other stuff to talk about, too. The Mike Trout injury. There's an Andrew Benintendi trade, which is kind of what led us to start down this path. So Andrew Benintendi on the move. He goes to the Yankees. I just have a quick Benintendi question for you. Do you have interest in him in some shallow leagues where he wasn't previously rostered because of the lack of homers and steals? Even though the slash line's been really good, he's been very productive as an offensive player. I think you could probably find him on the wire in some at least 10-team leagues out there, especially leagues that only start 3 outfielders, moving into a much more hitter-friendly environment as a left-handed bat, especially. How much more power are you expecting from Benintendi, and how does that change his shallow league appeal?
He changed his approach because of the park. So I think there's at least, I don't know, like a 25 to 30% chance that he actually changes his approach back again to go for power, because it's a more power friendly park. And then he's got that short porch there. There's some intention in what he's done. And so why can't he change that intention to now try to pull the ball hard in the air? I would say if he continues the way he's going, you'd expect 1 or 2 more homers. Not a big deal. However, there's this outside chance, this little sliver of a chance that he now decides that it's time to sell out for power, or at least try to pull the ball in the air more. That's exciting. And then the real reason that I would pick him up in those shallower leagues is runs and RBI. I think, when I wrote the piece saying, here are the budget alternatives, Benintendi was the budget alternative to Juan Soto. And the reason he was in the conversation was Benintendi had the second or third best projected on base percentage among the players available at the deadline. So I would assume that the Yankees install him near the top of the order. So runs and RBI, plate appearance chances with runners on base, a little bit outside chance of altering that approach and hitting for more power. I think it's a good day for Andrew Benintendi.
And as I understand it, the 3 prospects going back the other way are really not like impact fantasy players anytime soon. So you're not really going to get a whole lot of keeper and dynasty league value out of immediately picking up any of those players. If you're going to pick up one, Beck Way is the pitcher that I think has the most appeal. I've talked to Keith Law a little bit on Thursday morning for the Athletic Baseball show. So there's your sleeper if there is one, but I would heavily emphasize if there is one. The Royals playing the volume game here, trying to get a few arms into that system. More interestingly, I think, is the situation that Benintendi leaves behind at the big league level. Now I think we see a lot more Kyle Isbel. He's been really up and down the last couple seasons with the Royals. I think they owe it to themselves to see if he can at least be a big side platoon player. I think it's possible he gets a chance to face some same-handed pitching if the Royals also move Michael Taylor, because you could see Kyle Isbel and Edward Olivares, once he's back from the IL, both in the lineup on a regular basis, which is something that just was not happening at all prior to this deadline.
Yeah, here's a player that has, by Fangraphs estimation, 40 present game power and also 50 raw power. And that's something you can see when you look at his max EV with the 111. That's above average, and his barrel rate is decidedly below average. I think that Royals hitting coaching is not necessarily as far behind as their pitching coaching. Sometimes all it takes is an extended chance where they don't feel like they're going to get sent down if they have a bad week for them to start, trying their A swing out more. You're going to use your B swing and try to get on base more if you're just trying to impress the manager and stay up. But eventually he needs to hit for more power to be more interesting. No, the numbers hew closer, the projections hew closer to barrel rate because that's more predictive. But the max EV says there's a little bit more to him. I think if he was given a full chance, and hit his upside, it's a guy who could hit 250, 260 with, 15-15 or even 20-20. But he really does need to unlock more of that raw power. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily likely. But anybody who steals bases is useful for the deeper leagues right now. And then once he gets healthy, he's got a quad strain right now. Edward Olivares should get finally someday a chance. He'll feel like he's the 5 option guy every year where he goes up and down 5 times. But he's an interesting guy because we had a term for this, and it's going to come up against later. I get a little bit of a Joey Wendell type vibe from him because he's around average or better than average in walk rate, strikeout rate, speed. Has the potential to be around average in power. Hasn't necessarily shown it yet, but he's right there. So he's an all around guy that doesn't really have a carrying tool or a standout facet that screams at you, but another guy who could hit 260, hit 15 homers and steal 10 bases in a full year if he was given a chance. So there's 2 names with some stolen bases attached that should get more of a chance now, especially because I think Michael Taylor is not that exciting, but there are teams that need some defense in center field, and to be able to add, I think Michael Taylor on your bench, right-handed outfielder that can play center for you, I think there's going to be a team that'll jump at that. So I would assume that Olivares and Isbel finally get everyday chances at some point this season.
In worst case scenario, if the Royals didn't trade Michael Taylor, he's under contract for 2023, they would probably use him more like a small side platoon player, play him a bit less to get a look at some younger players for the future, because you have to figure out what kind of role will Isbel have in the future? What kind of role will Olivares have in the future? How do you make these pieces fit in 2023 and beyond? I think based on the ceilings you mentioned, it seemed like your ceiling for Isbel was just a little bit higher than Olivares. So if you were in a deep mixed keeper league trying to just find some future value, would you prioritize Isbel ahead of Olivares if they were both available?
Yeah, Isbel's hit the ball 111, and Olivares has not done that yet. Olivares has tapped into his barrel rate a little bit more, but I almost find that meaningless when you're comparing these types of samples and you're talking about Olivares has a 6% barrel rate and Isbel has like a 4.5, 5. It's like neither one of them stands out on that. I think Olivares might make a little bit more contact, but Isbel is just, I think, a little bit more athletic and more capable of center field, which I think is meaningful here.
Let's tear down the Cubs roster, because I think that's a lot of fun.
About to happen.
We already saw the hug ceremony from Wilson Contreras. Almost a little awkward, but it's kind of the way things go at this point. People just know sometimes they're going to be traded. We don't know where Wilson Contreras is going to go. If they keep Yan Gomes, I think Yan Gomes becomes more interesting for fantasy purposes. But if they also trade Yan Gomes, I don't think they necessarily have a catcher that you want to roster. I don't think PJ Higgins is all that interesting. But I think the Ian Happ possibility is kind of interesting, because that opens up outfield playing time. And there's a lot of different ways that playing time could be distributed. So is there anybody in the depths of the Cubs roster that you think is interesting, either at AAA or possibly on the bench right now in the big leagues, that would play more if they find a deal that works for Happ?
Nelson Velasquez is playing and nearly every day, but it's a pinch hit appearance, a pinch runner appearance. Center field, left field. They seem hesitant to press go fully. Maybe because he's a right-hander, maybe because he strikes out too much, maybe because he wasn't a top prospect, maybe because the hit tool isn't there, but the power's there. Here's a guy who's hit the ball 111 and in a small sample has the 15% barrel rate, and also in the minor leagues has the slugging rates that you expect from a guy with real power. So if you're just chasing power with a couple steals, I think they used him as a pinch runner recently. He's got some speed. I think Nelson Velasquez is the guy who's going to get a chance.
Yeah, a lot of swing and miss that we've seen in the upper levels of the minors for Nelson Velasquez. But as we've seen, Patrick Wisdom's probably a good example of this within the same organization.
They're not afraid of it.
They're not afraid of it when it comes down to giving someone who can barrel the ball an opportunity. So that might be something that does open up the door for Nelson Velasquez. I was also wondering, on the pitching side, if Marcus Stroman could be moved. We're seeing some other names pop up on the starting pitcher market because of slides from the Red Sox and the Giants, right? Nathan Eovaldi and Carlos Rodon might actually get moved. That didn't look like it was going to happen just a few weeks ago. Stroman has an opt-out after 2023. He just signed with the Cubs this offseason. It was 3 years, $71 million. He's been hurt this year a bit, but I would think the Cubs would be willing to flip him if there is a team interested in trading for him. And given the number of teams that want starting pitching, I think that market actually exists. The weird thing with the Cubs, and this is true of most teams that would possibly trade established starting pitching, they don't necessarily have good starting pitching waiting for an opportunity. Most teams don't have that, but we could get another look at Caleb Killian if the Cubs move a starter, and maybe even if they don't.
I'm not waiting with bated breath. I also just think Stroman's profile is not one that most teams are chasing right now. And it's not completely clear to me. There's this line where years of team control becomes a contract you want to offload. You know what I mean? And I don't think his contract is underwater, but I don't necessarily think of it as an asset. So I'm not sure that teams would be like, oh, we can get him for this year and we'll pencil him for next year, when his results right now are only okay and he's not like a frontline guy. So I kind of doubt he'll get traded, but I do think the bullpen will be raided. Mm-hmm. David Robertson, has already been linked to New York and I think 8 other teams. So,
yeah.
He's going to go. I'd be tempted to just hand the ball to Michael Givens, but then he might go too. And if Michael Givens goes, I guess maybe it's Efros. Let me see here. What you got to do is you got to look over the last sort of 14 days on the Cubs and among the relievers, and you got to look for holds. That's step one. So the holds have gone to Rowan Wick and Scott Efros. The pitching plus model says Efros has bad stuff but good command, and Rowan Wick has good stuff and good command. So I'm gonna give the ball to Rowan Wick if David Robertson and Michael Givens leave town.
Yeah, I think both of those guys will get traded. I think Chris Martin would also be a name that could get flipped too, just if you're looking for veterans that there's no real reason why you'd assume the Cubs would hold none of those players. I think that's a possibility. This other team that's kind of clearly selling that doesn't necessarily have a lot of internal talent, Cincinnati, right? Brandon Drury should be one of the more versatile bats that is available at this deadline. I want to say Jose Barrero could play a lot more. He's not been great at AAA this year. It's kind of strange given how well he played at the same level last year. Those samples are kind of similar in size. I wonder if health is a factor of just missing a lot of time with injury this year. If Barrero's still not 100% healthy, or for a good part of this year he wasn't.
Power is really departed, and the strikeout rate is just leapt.
Yeah, 38.3% this year after he struck out 22% of the time at that level a season ago. So it's been strange. He's got power, he's got speed. I would assume they'd give him a shot if they had room almost anywhere. But who else could the Reds turn to if they move some combination of Drury, Tommy Pham, and even Tyler Naquin?
We made some pre-show notes, and this is maybe one of the sadder parts of the pre-show notes. It just says Fraley, Friedel, Almora, and then a sad face emoticon.
Oh yeah, you do have a sad face in there.
But Jake Fraley, I think is the guy that is most fantasy friendly, and I think just honestly somebody that I would give the biggest chance to, because here's a guy that I think could play center. I'd want to know if he can play center because he's played it off and on, his whole career. I'd want to just hand the ball to Fraley and say, dude, you're healthy. We need a center fielder. You're a lefty that really gets on base with the best of them. Can you unlock some of that power? Can you be the person that, Zips projects him to be 13% better than league average and, show decent defense and do something that would translate to 25-20 with homers and steals over a full season. So that's the guy I'm most interested in, particularly in OBP leagues. And I think that could happen no matter what happens. I think they could just decide, Naquin's not really part of our future. Almora is, a fourth outfielder, probably by true talent. Wherever it is in the outfield, we're just going to give the ball to Fraley.
It's weird that a lot of the players that get these opportunities, guys that are 25, 26, 27 years old, they offer a little bit of speed. A lot of them could be players that steal 8, 10, 12 bases maybe over 2 months if they end up in everyday roles. And to me, it feels like the last chance to really find someone that could be a difference maker in the category, because it's the last big playing time shift, barring a surprising injury to a regular, where one player like this comes in and takes all the playing time.
I would assume that a lot of these players stick around because they have the athleticism and they can do something at the plate, either walk or not strike out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so the reason they're hanging around and the reason people finally give them a chance is to see what the true talent power looks like, right? And power might be something that develops late, or just they need to fill out, they need to get bigger, whatever it is. They needed to see more people. So it's like there's that one missing thing that could unlock their a chance. I mean, like Connor Joe was a guy that has some athleticism, was hanging around, had some speed, had the on base, and the question was what the power would look like. Now he's getting the long-term shot this year, and he's not really showing the power, but at least all the other things have made him about a league average player. And so, I think of Connor Joe when I think of Jake Fraley, and there's something similar about both of them. So I think Fraley's one of, even sad face emoticon aside, I think he's one of the more interesting guys on this list. Oh, and look, they have Michael Papierski. How did he end up on the Reds from the Giants?
I want to talk about Baltimore for a second. We don't know who exactly moves. They could trade Trey Mancini. They may just hold him because they don't get a good offer. Anthony Santander has a few years of control left. It seems like he's a possibility to get traded. If a spot for a regular bat opens up, it's probably somewhere in a corner. So who could step up there if you create a spot?
My name that I like the most on our podcast today. Mr. Kyle Stowers, come on down. He's already had a chance in the major leagues. He's been to AAA. He has basically smashed the ball wherever he's been. Lefty with good on-base skills, not great contact skills, but a lot of power. I think you say, let's get some of the kinks out of the way so that we get the best version of Kyle Stowers when we're ready to go. I think the clock has already started. He's already used an option year. Let's get him in there and let's have him play every day and start making the adjustments he needs to make at the major league level. I don't think there's that much left for him to do at the minor league level.
You know who Kyle Stowers is as a player in terms of a comparable, like a more highly regarded prospect that just came up? He's basically JJ Bleday. Maybe even a slightly better version of JJ Bleday, as a better speed grade, according to Fangraphs, maybe a little less present hit tool, but looking across the board, lefty, corner outfielder, power first, hit tool maybe. Like that's kind of the profile I'm expecting from Stowers.
Yeah. Bleday has the chance to strike out less. I mean, he's shown that at some of his stops, but not too far off. I think Stowers is actually worth getting excited about. Might be worth, even in NFBC formats. You don't want to put too much money down, because what if they stand pat and he's still in the minor leagues? So I think I'd keep it under $5, which is not very much out of 1,000. But put $2 on him, put $3 on him. It's one of those, like, it's like a scratcher.
You can only do that with 1 or 2 roster spots this time of year, but this is the time of year to think about it. If you have enough health across the rest of your roster, pick your spots, take your chances, and try and find some surplus value on the cheap. Because if you wait a week and Stowers ends up getting promoted because of the trade, it's going to be $50 to $70 potentially, especially if he comes up, hits a few homers in the series leading into the next Fab run. The bullpen here is one of the spots where you could also see a closer move. I know Britt has suggested Jorge Lopez make a lot of sense, even if they're still playing for this year. We already saw them move relievers earlier in the year. Tanner Scott going to Miami. So you look at the makeup of this roster and you think about Felix Bautista, someone who's really popped in the pitching model all season long. There's a chance Bautista is getting some saves, maybe all the saves for the Orioles, if they do in fact move Lopez.
Yeah, I mean, I like Dylan Tate some too, but if Bautista has the holds, and he's also, I think, number 1 in Stuff Plus in the entire big leagues. So I think they've got their guy in place, and I think it's nice to have Dylan Tate. That means it's more likely you trade Jorge Lopez because you have Dylan Tate and I don't know how to say his name. Chonel Perez. Sure. Perez and Tate behind Bautista, so you still have like the chance at a working bullpen, and you could benefit from that. Back to Stowers real quick. Is there anybody on that level, or anybody that you would put in that category of put $1 or $2 on them in NFBC? I think maybe Olivares. I wish he was healthy. Isbel, they'd be behind Stowers for me. Fraley would be, I think, behind Stowers, although maybe more likely to just get the chance. Velasquez is also similar to Stowers.
I'd go Stowers over Velasquez, though.
Velasquez needs a trade to happen, I think. Stowers does too. That's the one nice thing about Fraley. He might not need a trade to happen. It might just happen anyway. So I think those are actually all interesting names. I might just put $1 on all of them and see which one I get.
Right. One big list, though. You're only picking up one. You're not picking up multiples in many situations. Again, focusing more on mixed leagues. Talking about mono leagues, okay. Take more shots in a mono league because finding playing time is really difficult to do. The players you're dropping in many of those cases are guys that don't play at all, or they're even stuck in the minors in plenty of those instances.
I do have a name that is on this level and maybe first in the group. Let's fly on over to Pittsburgh.
Oh, back to Pittsburgh. Is there anything standing out to you on this depth chart that wasn't already interesting? Like Jack Suwinski.
That's what I'm saying.
Has the cheap power, but
he's in the minors. He'll come back up as soon as they trade Ben Gamel. I don't think they trade Brian Reynolds, but I think they could trade Ben Gamel.
Yeah, I think I like Suwinski maybe a little less than Stowers. 14 homers already in 250 plate appearances this season. But
what do you want from Stowers? You want cheap power. What did Suwinski already showed you? Cheap power.
Both maybe a little less swing and miss.
Yeah, both are not going to give you a big batting average, though, I don't think. I don't think there's anybody on here who's going to give you everything. Unless Fraley just gets super hot and lucky with the batting average.
Fraley's probably a low average power speed guy. I kind of think Fraley has the most. Fraley and Isbel have the most ways of making positive value for you.
That's true.
So I think they're probably a little ahead of the masher types.
But Velasquez will steal some bases too. It's really hard to separate all these guys, actually. I mean, Stowers in like a keeper league, if you're like in a keeper league where someone could play their way into keepers, like 10, 15 keepers or dynasty type, then Stowers is the obvious guy. And I think that's why I still have him first, because I have that sort of prospect unknown potential, could just run with it feeling from him. But then behind him is this group where Suwinski, Velasquez, they're kind of similar mashers, but Velasquez steals a little bit. Fraley and Isbel are both homer, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. You know, if you need the speed, I would look more in the Fraley Isbel category than anywhere else.
Oakland has Ramón Laureano and Sean Murphy as two really good position players they could move, but the problem I see is that you're talking about maybe Shea Langoliers and Christian Pache. Pache has really struggled against big league pitching so far, so I don't know if there's anything beyond AL only sort of appeal with Pache. And if they wait on Langoliers, then you're probably looking at someone like Austin Allen, who can mash for a second catcher. And maybe because of where he'd hit in the order, I could justify that as a pickup in like a 15-team mixed league. But the problem in Oakland is the quality of the replacements. I think the thing that could be good about both Laureano and Sean Murphy is that they could return players who are big league ready at other positions. That's part of what makes trading them appealing.
And that's literally how Oakland works. So in fact, talking about who might come up on the Athletics is kind of irrelevant because A, they don't really have good prospects. And B, they're going to trade for the prospects. And, it's like the Kevin Smith situation. They're going to trade for guys who are, have popped up recently, who are ready for the big leagues. And so they'll probably just insert all the guys that they get for Laureano if they trade Laureano. Now, will they trade Laureano? I mean, he's still under contract for next year. He's not too expensive yet. But I know that Ramón Laureano wants to be traded.
Yo, Kevin Smith.
I talked to him about it extensively last night.
He's ready to leave. He's ready to move on.
Yeah, that's what he said. That I sort of pointed to the lockers and I said, "What's it like just to be on a team where like, who are these people?
New teammates almost every day."
And he said, "There's no one here, man. It's not a big league situation." He said, and I was like, "It's on purpose, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's on purpose." And then he said, "I've been getting into caffeine. That's what I've been trying. More and more caffeine." And that's what he said he's been doing to counteract the fact there's no fans at the parks. And so apparently he's been like carrying around an espresso machine and he travels with it now. And so he's downing triple espressos before the game to try and make up for the lack of fans. So, and then I said something about Milwaukee, and he's like, "Oh, you know what happens in Milwaukee? 100 mile per hour, 30-degree launch angle balls. They actually go out."
Yeah, it's amazing.
He says that doesn't happen here. So, I think, people look at Laureano without the sort of knowledge or without thinking of the park and say, he's a guy who's hitting 224 with 10 homers. Not that exciting, but I do think his power could take a real lurch forward if he went to the right place. And there is something I like about him going to Milwaukee. Like, for example, I know you like Tyrone Taylor a little bit, but what if you just traded Tyrone Taylor for Ramón Laureano?
Yeah, you're probably sending back some minor leaguers too, but that's the kind of thing. And
that's what would happen.
You look at Taylor and say, "Hey, wait a minute. Now he joins our group of outfielders who might not be playing in your mixed league right now, who could play in your mixed league with more playing time, even though the situation gets worse. Playing time situation gets better." You know what's weird about Oakland? Kevin Smith is still stuck at AAA, and he's not hitting. He tore up that level. He was 44% better than a league average hitter last year. Yes, AAA pitching was down last year. He still has not homered. Right, yeah, he's played 32 games at AAA. I think it's Vegas. No
And
homers.
Vegas is a good place to homer.
Weird. So weird to
Although I
be
don't
as
know.
good
Do
as
you
he was
know
last year.
if the new park? It's a new park, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen park factors for the new park in Vegas.
Yeah.
If it is it a new park or is it a remodeled old park?
Oh, it's a remodeled old park, but I think they changed the dimensions. He has a 22 WRC plus. Oh,
I thought he was gonna be good, like really good. I thought he was gonna be power, speed, everyday role for the A's. I thought he'd finish the year as the starting shortstop. It's been a terrible year for
I think
Kevin
there's
Smith.
an underrated problem in Oakland is the poor coaching, poor player development, and they've got some people that are good, at the major league level, but I think they failed to invest in the structure in the minor leagues, and
I'm
it
shocked.
shows. Yeah,
Absolutely shocked that they would
this
not
is my shocked
invest in a
face.
structure. That
Yeah,
is
but
what Oakland's all about.
I don't have any notes here for Oakland because of that fact, really.
No. Other situations. I mean, I'm trying to find other positives. Who else, as you went diving through these various depth charts, stood out? There was one name in DC that we've never talked about in this show, Josh Palacios, a
Yeah.
speedy outfielder. If you think back to last season when the Cubs made a bunch of trades and Rafael Ortega started playing a lot more, and he took advantage of that playing time, carved out a role for this year. I think that's the kind of profile that Josh Palacios has. So if the door opens, and it probably will, it could be a Nelson Cruz trade and just a floating DH that creates a spot where they maybe move Yadiel Hernandez over to DH more often, and then Palacios plays in the outfield. Suddenly, he's at least getting a big side platoon role, but he could be an everyday guy that quickly bumps Victor Robles back to the bottom of the order. Another leading off Victor Robles. Thank you for tweeting at me, by the way, everybody, every time something happens with Victor Robles. Really appreciate the updates. We know that's not going to last. So, yeah, I think Josh Palacios could end up being one of those names that comes out of nowhere to have some appeal for us here down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think almost throwing a Joey Wendell on him is not appropriate. He's shown at various stops the ability to have an above average walk rate, an above average strikeout rate and contact rate, and above average speed and above average defense. Now the question is power. That has only popped a few times in small samples, so I would not really bet on the power. But not having power is something that sort of strips away a chance to hit for a good batting average. So I know he's hitting 306 in AAA right now. Projections 250, 230. He looks speedy enough to me that I think he could get up to 260, 270 if he has a 100 ISO. But he has to have at least a 100 ISO and isolated slugging percentage. The major league average is like 170 or something. It might be down to 160 with the new ball, but he'll have below average power. But put him on the list with Fraley in that Fraley Isbel. Do you have one that you like better than the rest?
Still probably Isbel of the bunch. He's the number one priority of the bunch. I think he's going to cost you a little bit more. A lot of these other names, because the trades haven't happened yet. They'll actually be min-bid players. Isbel might take 22 out of 1,000 or 33 out of 1,000. Something that's above a 1% bid, but not way above a 1% bid. Because he's been bad enough when given those chances where people, I think, have lost some of their optimism.
Yeah, and what's nice about him is he's had more chances than Palacio, so there's more chance for him to have made adjustments and have a plan this time. Understand what it takes and take it and run with it. Whereas Palacios may just be overwhelmed again. It may just be his first chance, and he did have a cup of coffee with Toronto last year, but and then Fraley is actually on the opposite end where we're getting closer to last chance saloon. He's had many chances and he's been okay, and someone just needs to sort of believe in him. So I think I might have Fraley first, but if you wanted to have a separate power and speed sort of FAB thread, I would probably go Stowers, Suwinski, Velasquez on the power side. And I would probably go Fraley, Isbel, Palacios on the speed side.
The other thing we have to keep in mind is you can imagine, think back to the time, I think it was the Zach Greinke trade that put Josh Rojas in Arizona. You could take a player who's really blocked in the minor leagues with his current organization, put him on a team like Oakland or plenty of other teams that are trying to find value for the future, and those players might be the big winners. It might be someone that you're not even thinking about on the depth chart of the team that's trading away a good player. So that's definitely something that we'll be watching as we're going to have our live stream, as I mentioned at the end of the 3-0 show. We have a live stream for the trade deadline going down at 6 Eastern, just before 6 Eastern, coming up on Tuesday. So we'll dig into these names as the opportunities open up.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to ideate on those guys because they have to be in the trade. So it's like kind of, but
it's like the Miguel Andujar. Like it's players like that.
Andujar, Esteury Ruiz.
Yeah, he's a little bit of that. Dominic Smith now is kind of falling into this trap. Doesn't have a spot, but some other team might say, "We're playing you. We think you can hit. We think you're good. So we're trading for you."
The Dodgers have someone that's. I mean, Miguel Vargas he's not really the same thing we're talking about. That's
he's a prospect.
Like a prospect, yeah. Yeah. So, who else could use a center fielder like Laureano?
Center fielders.
I've got the Brewers in the bottom as contenders. The Phillies.
Yep, Phillies have needed a center fielder for a while.
So they send Vierling. Yeah.
Vierling's already playing a decent bit, though, right? I mean, he's moving around a lot, too. That's been the surprise for me.
But, 77 WRC plus. He has hit the ball hard by max EV. The barrel rate's boring, but the contact rate is good. I could totally see the Phillies trading Matt Vierling. It wouldn't be the centerpiece as part of a group to get Laureano. I think that would actually make sense for them. They've been looking for a center fielder.
I think the A's would jump all over that. Hey, we got a guy that's making the league minimum that can play all over the place. Yeah, let's get him back as part of the trade.
Who else in center field is in the bottom half? But the Rays? I don't know.
I don't think that's the answer.
I don't know. I mean, they could do the thing where they trade for him and flip him again.
No, that's not necessary in this case.
And then by the time you get to the Astros.
Yeah, they could upgrade there. They're getting by fine without a clear-cut everyday center fielder so far, but that's a spot they could upgrade.
I think I think what you could do is, because Myers was hurt and his power numbers are down, I think you could do something where you temporarily demote Myers and you trade like a Chas McCormick to the A's plus pieces for Laureano. That fits our scenario where you got a guy who's 27 and playing pretty well, but the Astros would maybe see Laureano as an upgrade. There's an outside chance there. And I'm not saying Chas McCormick is the centerpiece of the deal. I'm just saying he's the major leaguer that could play in Oakland after the deal is consummated.
Anything else that stands out to you as far as players that could pop with an opportunity? It seems like we've covered a ton of ground so far.
The one place we haven't gone yet is Arizona, and we had a whole podcast about Arizona and Arizona-like teams on the 3-0 pod this week about teams where it's kind of hard to tell exactly what they're going to do. Now, I think for sure they've got to trade David Peralta. Like, there's no reason to keep him around at all. They have a 0% chance of making the playoffs, and they've got tons of outfielders. And I think they would give a chance, an everyday chance to Jake McCarthy. They're kind of already doing that. He's kind of like the DH right now. Right. But maybe Pavin Smith, when he gets back from the disabled list, it's a fractured right wrist though. So
Dominic Fletcher is the name. He's the guy.
That's your guy. He's
your
like
bridge guy.
You like this guy.
It's not the profile that I get excited about. It's just more of this is the dude that has put up decent numbers in the minors. He doesn't hit for a lot of power. He doesn't steal bases. So
no prospect evaluator likes him.
Not a good fantasy player, other than the playing time could just be there.
Well, he's hit for average everywhere he's been, and the batting average is pretty good, and the plate discipline is good. So there's an outside chance he hits for an okay average and okay power. But yeah, it seems more like a kind of a mono league situation.
Yeah, that's exactly where I think the interest would be capped for me if it is in fact Fletcher. So I just look at that situation and I'm really excited about Corbin Carroll. We're going to have a ton of conversations about him for 2023 during draft season because I think he can be on the opening day roster and he can be an impact guy next year. I'd be very surprised if they started giving him big league plate appearances in the final 2 months of this season. Pleasantly surprised, but surprised nonetheless.
I might put Jake McCarthy in one of my threads. I'm not sure he'd be number one, but there's an interesting collection of skills here. 6% barrel rate is slightly above average. He stole 11 bases in the minors last year, and he's stolen as much as 29 bases. 32 across all levels in 2021. So the guy with speed, the guy with patience. The contact rate and the power rate go up and down, but he's barreled some balls so far this year. He's a really interesting guy to watch because he almost has like a Kyle Tucker stance at the plate or Cody Bellinger, where he's like super erect, I guess is the word. And then he kind of
upright. Use the word upright in place.
Jeez. Anyway, and then he gets into a regular hitting position. Jake McCarthy, I think, is without knowledge of a Fletcher, and also just the fact that he's playing right now is an interesting pickup in the deeper leagues.
Yeah, already has a role, less of a leap of faith, and I think the Peralta trade is basically a certainty at this point. I think there's plenty of teams that could use him as an upgrade, as a corner option. Should we talk about the Mike Trout situation for a moment?
I've seen, kind of lobbies on both sides of like, oh, God, this is the end. And this is such a tragic moment. And then Jeff Fletcher tweeted yesterday that, he talked to Mike Trout and he's like, I'm fine. This is something I have to manage. It's from what I understand, it's not the David Wright situation where his spine was getting worse over time. I think it's just sort of like it's like a chronic back thing. It's like, it is maybe why he'll leave the game, but it's not, he's going to leave the game this year.
Right. That's my interpretation of what we know so far too, right? It's called costovertebral dysfunction. And I was talking about this on the Athletic Baseball show. I don't think I've ever actually seen that as an injury before. And I've written up injuries for players in all major sports for about 15 years.
Like spondylosis or something.
Yeah, and then there was the Prince Fielder. He had a fusion, I think, of the vertebrae. Like that was a major surgery. That doesn't seem to be on the table for Trout right now, so that seems pretty different. This almost seems more like back and ribs together, just based on the way it was initially reported. And I start thinking of stuff like thoracic outlet syndrome or conditions more like that, which, again, with the proper treatment, rehab, management.
Or feeling like almost like that when you strain your oblique, so he has some like pain when he turns. That's not good because baseball is a rotational sport.
A lot of torque.
The thing that I see in his profile I think that is true if you look over the last few years is when the Angels fall out of it, you may lose Mike Trout.
Well, that's going to happen every single year. They're not a good organization, right?
I think that's the risk with Mike Trout. You get him for good first halves, and then the second half depends on how he feels and how the Angels are doing.
I think it reduces the likelihood, whatever the chances were of Mike Trout being traded. Some teams saying, yeah, it's fine. We love Mike Trout. We'd love to have him. We don't care. We'll take on the big contract. Those chances are closer to zero now because of this. They were low. If it was 5% before, it's like 1% now or less than 1% now. And I just think it's going to force the Angels to do better as an organization with uncertainty around Mike Trout long term. Everything else they do as an organization has to get better. Otherwise, they will never find a way to win. They need to do this even with a healthy Trout. now it just pushes them even further in that direction. I mean,
they're going to sign Carlos Rodon to like a massive contract. This is what happens. Their owner is always like shiny bauble, need the new thing. We haven't paid for a pitcher. We got a time to pay for a pitcher.
Yeah, so you think they're going to do that. Now, at the deadline, Noah Syndergaard moves. They are firmly in the don't have enough starting pitchers as it is group. Again, not alone among teams that are trading pitchers away. More consistency from Chase Silseth in terms of his role is probably something that would happen with that. The other part of all this
likes him enough. If he gets a chance, Chase, I would give him a look. It says he's basically above average in all three facets of the game. So
the comp I saw, it was just a Twitter graphic that came up last night. I was just doing a Mike Trout search looking for the news. I apologize. I don't remember whose handle this was originally made by, but it was comparing Mike Trout side by side to Frank Thomas through the first 9-10 years of their respective careers. And it's pretty amazing to look at the production. And I think we maybe underrate Frank Thomas a little bit in hindsight. I mean, obviously the era.
Oh, he was one of my favorites. I just loved he was like the 300, 400, 500 guy, just had the cleanest batting approach. It was so good.
But it's also a kind of a good reminder. Like Trout's a large human. Frank Thomas was obviously a large human as well. And players, like these big players, these superstars that could play multiple sports. You can't tell me if Mike Trout wasn't a professional baseball player, they wouldn't be a pro athlete in something else. Frank Thomas could have played football, could have played tight end probably in the NFL.
Yeah, I'd make Trout a safety. Does that even exist anymore? Inside linebacker, some sort of.
Yeah, he'd play somewhere in the middle of the defense, most likely, if he was a football player, right? No doubt in my mind, he would have at least made it to the pros, if not been a great one. I just wonder if there is something in a body type that almost works against you at a certain point. Like you can actually be too big. And I'm not saying the Angels did anything wrong by extending him. They did right by extending Mike Trout. This is the player you always extend. And people are having these thoughts now, Juan Soto, maybe we just want to trade for him and maybe I don't want my team to extend Juan Soto. What's happening physically to Mike Trout right now has nothing to do with whether or not you should extend Juan Soto. Like that has.
I see Juan Soto
totally separate.
Aging. I mean, he plays like Miguel Cabrera. I think he may be a little bit more smaller than Miguel Cabrera, maybe
a safer body type, a more.
But I think he could end up like Miguel Cabrera,
right? And I think this is
just
part
not
of
as much defensive value, but just always able to hit.
You get to the end of the career for a player like that, and you're like, oh man, this is brutal. This guy's just not even a shell of the player that he used to be. Okay, but enjoy the ride. Enjoy the next 12 years. Where he is one of the best hitters in the game for at least half of that time and a very good one for the other half before you get to the late part of the career.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think if your favorite team is the team that trades for Juan Soto, I don't think you look at that and say, I'm worried about what's happening with Trout. Don't extend Soto. Don't think like that. This is just an unfortunate thing. We don't know how bad it is just yet. We'll obviously learn a lot more about it. And I think you got to be careful not to read too much into what the Angels do with Trout down the stretch because this is a lost season. I wonder if this also is a nudge for them to make some kind of long-term decision on Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani's a free agent at the end of next season. Does Ohtani even want to stay with the Angels given what's happened so far while he's been there? I think there's a lot of unanswered questions about that, and I don't expect him to get moved at the deadline. But if we had a trade deadline where Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani were both traded, I think we'd have a shot at the best trade deadline of all time.
That would be nuts. That would immediately, like, two teams would just empty out the farm systems. Like, it would take the most ever. It would be the biggest trades ever. I was talking to an executive recently that thought that, prospects are overrated in the game right now, overvalued in the game right now. And if you do have somebody in your front office that says Shohei Ohtani, even for a year and a third, yeah, man, it's going to be better than these guys probably. Even if these guys that we're trading hit their absolute ceilings, are they going to be Shohei Ohtani? I have zero belief that Ohtani would stay. Like, I think he wants to test the market, and I think he would want to leave.
He's going to break the market. That's going to be the best part. I think it was Trevor May. Trevor May was on the No Bunts podcast. The No Dunks guys are doing a once a week baseball show. They had Trevor May on. We've had Trevor May on our show before. He's always a great interview. And he was just laughing. He's like, he's two guys. He's two players. He's going to shatter every expectation anyone's ever had about free agency because he's
whatever number you'd give the hitter, add it to whatever number you'd give the pitcher.
And you go, oh, that's actually more money than anyone's ever got before. But it makes sense because he's two players in one body. It's truly amazing. The prospects being overrated in the game right now, I almost wonder if that's fallout from the lost pandemic season, lost development time, and massive gaps in terms of player development around the league. There are some teams that develop players really well and maybe have a good sense of who's a finished product and who isn't. And there's other teams that don't do that well. And I think that creates these massive swings in value with young players too.
Yeah, that's possible. It's possible it's a temporary condition, but there's also just, there's all these buzzwords we're going to hear: team control, flexibility, roster flexibility. I want to build the next great, I want to build the next great Tigers team. I want to build the next great Padres, whatever it is. It's not going to be the Padres, but all these like sort of buzzwords, that either they believe it or they're selling that stuff pretty hard to their owners. Look at these great prospects we got. Please let me keep my job for the next 3-4 years. If I can sell my owner on a rebuild, I can keep my job for at least another 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, how do you do that in Detroit though? We're in the rebuild. I need another rebuild.
I think the problem, if you've already gone through it once and you didn't land where you wanted to, I think you're unfortunately in danger as a front office of just being replaced, which stinks. They're humans being removed from jobs, having their lives
not calling for anything like that.
I'm not into that. I'm not into the fire these people. It's just more of the writing is on the wall in Detroit. The rebuild is not going well. There's probably going to be consequences for the people that have been putting this together. The hard thing about it is that,
to be fair, if you're running a team, there has to be accountability.
Sure,
you have to fire people sometimes because you just have to. Otherwise, you just become complacent. The A's lead the league in organizational tenure. Their people have been with the A's forever. I don't think this is a good thing.
I think with the A's, they're in this new valley they've never really been in before. Like they've played the middle a lot. They've been bad on occasion, but they've reached a new bottom, right? Like they have fallen. They've fallen about as far as they've fallen at any point in the last 20 years.
Well, they were making the playoffs a lot. Was it bad then? I would say yes. The coaching was not amazing, and that you have to have metrics other than made the playoffs when you're kind of assessing your organizational value.
You've mentioned this, that you don't really like their farm system right now, and I think they've got, looking at James Anderson's A's list right now, I think he's got 5 prospects in the top 200 on his list, 0 inside the top 50. When you're as bad as the A's are at the big league level and you don't have 1 or 2 prospects in the top 50, I think you're missing the mark. I think the Montas trade is really important for them. A Sean Murphy trade is really important for them. The Laureano trade is really important for them. And if they don't, if we go, let's say a year from now, right? Prospect graduations, all these things happen. You get a year ahead from now, and they've still only got 1 prospect in the top 50, and they're still really bad, and the organization doesn't have good depth yet, then something is fundamentally broken. I think what they were asked to do as an organization was pretty different. This was rip it down to the studs, and I think that's why.
I think it also is an argument for the Murphy, Laureano, and Montas trades actually happening. Because in the past, you could say, well, all those guys are under contract for next year. They always try to be good in any given year. Well, they did not try to be good this year. They did not spend the $30 million they normally spend. And they have no prospects. So I think, you take advantage of all those years of control that those players have, and you get the very most for them. I mean, when was the last time that someone's traded a catcher with like 4 or 5 years of team control? that was as good as Sean Murphy. It's not the Dodgers were never going to trade Will Smith. Never.
Yeah, I mean, how much time did Real Muto still have?
I guess Ruiz is Ruiz, but Ruiz wasn't established like Murphy. And Ruiz, frankly, is not as good as Murphy right now. Murphy barrels more. You know, Murphy is a top 3 framer in the game.
Yeah, Sean Murphy's a really good player. He's a really good player in a bad situation. I'd say Laureano is a good player in a bad situation. But I look up and down.
I could see the Giants trying to go after Murphy.
I don't even see players on the depth chart that I look at and go, that's a future big leaguer. That's a future starter. That's
in Oakland. Yeah, no,
it's awful.
That's what's bad for me. It's like, you know, it's like and just to let you inside, like covering and writing and being in the clubhouse, like usually when you're on a rebuilding team, you identify the 2 or 3 players that you're like, oh, these guys are going to be good. And I remember, you know, seeing Matt Olson and Matt Chapman, and I got fairly, you know, tight with Matt Olson over time, and you know, because you put the effort in, you try to connect with them, you talk to them, you know, off the record a lot, and you know, you try to establish something. I don't know who to do that with. I would like to do it with Murphy, but catchers are super busy game day, so it is actually a little bit hard to kind of get in with them a lot. So I just end up hanging out with Lowry and Laureano and Boder and wait for the next great players to come in.
You know, part of this is that with the super tank approach the A's are using, you do get a couple of 1-1 picks, and that can turn your farm system around pretty quickly. You can cut the line a little bit, so you can get away with some of your past mistakes.
They bought another catcher, Daniel Susak, this year, and then Tyler Stevenson was their last big pick. That might be their best prospect other than Shea
Soderstrom. Yeah, Tyler Soderstrom.
Soderstrom, you know, that's another catcher. So I got 3 catchers. And so you're looking at Murphy like, I got 3 catchers behind their best prospects. 3 of their 4 best prospects are catchers. So
we are going to go. Obviously, a lot likely to happen between now and our next episode. We'll, of course, be back on Monday. You can find us on Twitter. Eno's at Enosaris. I'm at Derek Van Riper. All the coverage of the trade deadline will be available on The Athletic. TheAthletic.com/rates and barrels gets you in the door for just $1 a month. If you got a question for us for a future episode, of course, you can tweet those our way, or you can email them to us at ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Monday.